I never thought I'd be back in space again. Funny how life works out that way. 1 minute you're planet-side, telling yourself you're done with the black for good, and the next, you're staring at a distress signal from a station that shouldn't exist. The alert came through while I was in my quarters, reviewing crew rotations for the next cycle. Standard stuff, boring stuff, the kind of administrative work that makes up 90% of a captain's job that no one tells you about when you're climbing the ranks. The console chimed, that 3-note emergency sequence that still makes my stomach drop even after all these years. "Captain Mitchell to the bridge," came Becker's voice over the comm. Something in his tone told me this wasn't a drill. I was already moving, shoving the rotation schedules aside. Took me maybe 30 seconds to reach the bridge. The Erickson isn't a large vessel, just a Class 3 patrol and rescue ship. Compact but reliable. She'd gotten us through worse. The bridge was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. 5 crew members at their stations, but nobody talking. Just the soft beeping of the instruments and the hum of the ventilation system. "Report," I said, heading straight for the command chair. Becker stood by the comm station, arms crossed tight over his chest. He's been my XO for 3 years now. Good man. Follows protocol to the letter, which is exactly what you want in a first officer. "We've received a distress signal, sir," he said, nodding to Munoz at communications. Munoz tapped his console. "Signal came in 20 minutes ago, Captain. Automated emergency broadcast from a station identifying as Omega-7. I frowned. Omega-7? That's not on any of our charts. "No, sir, it isn't," Becker confirmed. "I've already checked the databases. There's no record of a station with that designation in this sector, or any sector." That didn't sit right. Space stations don't just appear out of nowhere, and they definitely don't get built without being on somebody's registry. Too expensive, too resource-intensive. Every station has a purpose, an owner, a record. "Let me hear it," I said. Munoz played the message. It was short, automated, just a computerized voice repeating, "This is Omega Station 7, emergency protocols activated, requesting immediate assistance, coordinates follow." Then a string of numbers that placed it about 12 hours from our current position at standard speed. "When was the last time we received an update from command about installations in this sector?" I asked. Becker straightened. 3 weeks ago, sir. Standard briefing. Nothing about any Omega stations." I walked to the main view screen, staring at the coordinates blinking on the nav display. Something felt wrong about this. Stations have designations, purposes. They're registered, monitored. They don't just sit out in space uncharted. "Have we attempted to establish communication?" I asked. "Yes, sir," Munoz replied. No response beyond the automated message. It's broadcasting on a loop. I drummed my fingers on the console edge. Protocol was clear. Any distress signal within our operational range required investigation. Didn't matter if the station was registered or not. People could be in trouble. But still, something about this felt off. "Set course for those coordinates," I told the helm. "Standard speed." "Aye, Captain," came the response. I turned to Becker. "Lieutenant Commander, I'd like to see you in my ready room." He nodded, following me off the bridge. Once the door closed behind us, I could see the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. Becker's always been by the book in front of the crew, but in private, we can speak more freely. "What do you think?" I asked, leaning against my desk. He took a moment before answering. "That's Becker, always considering his words carefully." "I don't like it, sir," he finally said. "An unregistered station sending out automated distress calls? It doesn't add up." My thoughts exactly. I walked to the small viewport, watching the stars shift as the Erickson changed course. Could be pirates. Lure in rescue ships, then hit them when they're vulnerable. Possible, but why use a designation like Omega-7? Why not pose as a registered station? Good point. Pirates usually try to seem legitimate. They don't advertise that they're operating outside the system. "What about classified operations?" Becker suggested. Military or corporate black site? I'd considered that too. If it was military, command would have briefed us. They wouldn't let us walk in blind. And corporate? I shook my head. Even the big companies register their stations, even if what happens inside stays secret. So what are we dealing with, sir? I rubbed my jaw, feeling the stubble I hadn't bothered to shave that morning. I don't know, but we're going to find out. I can have Sandoval prepare a security team, Becker offered. Do it, but keep it quiet. No need to alarm the crew until we know what we're facing. He nodded, then hesitated. There's something else, sir. The signal. Munoz says it's using an older encryption protocol, one that hasn't been standard for at least 15 years. That was interesting and concerning. Old station? Or someone using outdated equipment? Either way, it adds to the mystery. I straightened up. All right, we proceed with caution. Full sensor sweep when we get within range. I want to know what we're looking at before we commit to docking. Understood, Captain. I spent the next few hours reviewing what little information we had, which wasn't much. Sent a message to command requesting any intel on Omega designations, but we were too far out to get a quick response. By the time we'd hear back, we'd already be at the station. Around hour 10 of our approach, I called the senior staff to the briefing room. Time to get everyone on the same page. They filed in one by one. Becker, of course. Then Jerome Munoz, our communications officer. Brilliant kid, kind of quiet, but he doesn't miss a thing. Brianna Sandoval came next, security chief and former tactical officer on the Hermes before transferring to the Erickson. Beverly Ortiz followed, our chief medical officer, datapad already in hand. Last was Kathleen McCormick, head engineer, still wiping grease from her hands with a rag. Thank you all for coming, I said once they were seated. As you know, we're responding to a distress call from an unregistered station. We'll be arriving in approximately 2 hours. Unregistered, sir? McCormick asked, her Irish accent more pronounced when she was curious. How's that possible? That's what we're going to find out, I replied. For now, we treat this as a standard rescue operation. Dr. Ortiz, prepare your team for possible casualties. She nodded, making notes on her pad. Any indication of what type of emergency we're responding to? Environmental failure? Medical outbreak? Structural damage? The message didn't specify, Munoz said. Just a standard automated distress call. Which means we prepare for everything, I said. McCormick, I want you ready to assist with any technical failures, life support, power systems, whatever they might need. Aye, Captain. She tucked the rag into her pocket. I'll prep the emergency kits. I turned to Sandoval. Chief, I want a security team ready, but let's not go in looking like we're expecting trouble. Standard sidearms only. She frowned slightly. With all due respect, Captain, an unregistered station is already unusual. I'd recommend at least... I understand your concern, I cut in. But if this is a legitimate emergency, I don't want to add to their stress by boarding with heavy weapons. We'll have them ready, but not front and center. She nodded, though I could tell she wasn't entirely convinced. Sandoval's job is to be paranoid. It's what makes her good at what she does. Lieutenant Commander Becker will lead the second team, I continued. I'll take the first. Standard procedure. Establish contact, assess the situation, render assistance as needed. They all nodded, professionals to the core. I'd handpicked each of them when I took command of the Erickson. Good people, smart, dependable. Questions? I asked. What's our extraction plan if things go sideways? Sandoval asked. Emergency recall to the ship. Becker or I give the signal. Everyone returns immediately. The Erickson will maintain position with engines hot. She seemed satisfied with that. Anything else? When no one spoke up, I nodded. Dismissed. We'll meet in the launch bay 30 minutes before arrival. As they filed out, Becker hung back. You're not telling them everything, he said quietly. I waited until the door closed. No point causing unnecessary concern. We don't know anything for certain yet. The crew deserves to know what they're walking into. And what exactly are they walking into, Becker? An abandoned station, Pirates, some classified project? I don't know, and neither do you. I softened my tone. Look, I'm not keeping secrets. I'm avoiding speculation. There's a difference. He considered this, then nodded. Fair enough, sir. The next 2 hours passed quickly. I checked in with each department, reviewed the emergency protocols one more time, and tried to ignore the growing sense of unease in my gut. Something about this mission felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. When we finally dropped out of FTL near the coordinates, the bridge went silent. There it is, Munoz said, voice hushed. On the view screen was a station unlike any I'd seen before. It was old, ancient almost. The design reminded me of the early deep space platforms from the first expansion era, all angular modules and external support struts rather than the smooth, integrated designs of modern stations. But this was bigger, much bigger, and it looked wrong somehow. The proportions were off, sections that shouldn't connect to each other joined by strange, winding corridors. The outer hull was scarred, pitted with what looked like impact marks, and it was dark, completely dark, except for a few emergency lights blinking near what appeared to be a docking port. Life signs? I asked. Munoz checked his readings. Inconclusive at this range, sir, but I'm detecting something unusual. Define unusual, Lieutenant. He frowned at his console. Energy signatures that don't match standard power systems. They're fluctuating in a pattern I've never seen before. That didn't sound good. Environmental status? Atmosphere is present, he reported. Oxygen levels are within human parameters. Temperature is low but survivable. Gravity systems appear to be functioning at approximately 0.8 standard. At least we wouldn't need full environmental suits. That was something. Take us in closer, I ordered the helm. Standard approach vector. As we drew nearer, the station's size became even more apparent. This wasn't some small research outpost. This was a major installation, easily large enough to house hundreds, maybe thousands of people. So, where was everyone? Still no response to hails, Munoz reported. Keep trying, I said. All channels, all frequencies. The Erickson glided toward the station's docking port. Up close, the damage to the hull was even more evident. Some of it looked like micrometeorite impacts, but other sections, they almost seemed deliberate. Patterns of scarring that couldn't have been accidental. Preparing for docking procedure, the helm announced. I stood, unable to shake the growing dread in my stomach. I'll be in the launch bay. Becker, with me. Munoz, you have the bridge until Lieutenant Kim arrives to relieve you. Then gear up and join Becker's team. Aye, Captain. The walk to the launch bay felt longer than usual. Becker and I didn't speak much. What was there to say? We both knew this wasn't a standard rescue mission, not anymore. The others were already there when we arrived, checking equipment and making final preparations. Dr. Ortiz was organizing her medical kit, McCormick was calibrating some kind of scanner, and Sandoval was giving last-minute instructions to her security officers. Listen up, I said, drawing their attention. We're about to dock with the station. Initial scans show atmosphere and gravity, so we'll go in with standard gear, not full suits. But keep your emergency breathers handy. If something goes wrong, you'll need them. I looked at each of them in turn. We'll split into 2 teams. I'll take McCormick and Dr. Ortiz to check the living quarters and medical facilities. Becker, you'll lead Munoz and Sandoval to the engine room and command center. Stay in constant communication, regular check-ins every 15 minutes. The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang that echoed through the hull. The sound sent a chill up my spine. It sounded final somehow, like a trap closing. Captain, Munoz said as he entered the bay, slightly out of breath from hurrying down from the bridge. I've got more detailed scans of those energy signatures. They're concentrated in the central section of the station. Nothing I can identify, but they're powerful, and they're pulsing. Pulsing how? McCormick asked, immediately interested. Like a heartbeat, Munoz said. Regular intervals, about one cycle every 23 seconds. That didn't sound like any power system I knew, and from the look on McCormick's face, she didn't recognize it either. We'll investigate, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt, but we stick to protocol. Safety first. The airlock indicator turned green, signaling a successful dock and pressure equalization. Time to go. I'll take point, I said, moving toward the airlock. Everyone stay close. We don't know what we're walking into. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond it was a short docking tube, then another airlock leading into the station itself. Standard design, at least. I stepped through first, immediately noticing the different quality of the air. It was breathable, as the sensors had indicated, but stale, recycled too many times, and there was a metallic tang to it that caught in the back of my throat. Stay close, I said again, drawing my sidearm as the inner airlock door slid open with a groan of disused mechanics. We were in. The airlock slid shut behind us with a hiss and clunk. The sound echoed through the empty corridor, bouncing off metal walls that hadn't heard human voices in who knows how long. Lights, I said, and Clyde activated his shoulder lamp. The rest of us followed suit, 4 beams cutting through the darkness. The illumination didn't make the place any more welcoming. Environmental systems are minimal, Beverly said, checking her scanner. Life support's running, but everything else is powered down. The main corridor stretched ahead, curving slightly with the station's design, standard layout for these older models. Living quarters would be to the left, operations and engineering to the right, with central areas for common facilities. No signs of structural damage, Kathleen said, running her hand along a wall panel. Power conduits are intact. Whatever happened here, it wasn't an explosion or hull breach. Then where is everyone? Clyde asked, his voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. I didn't have an answer for that. We'd been on plenty of rescue missions, but something about this one felt wrong. The silence was too complete. Even abandoned stations usually had the background noise of automated systems, the hum of circulation fans, the occasional ping of metal expanding or contracting. Let's check operations first, I said. Might get some answers from the logs. We moved forward, our footsteps echoing. The station wasn't large, probably designed for a crew of 20 or 30 at most. As we approached the junction that would lead to operations, Beverly's scanner beeped. I'm picking up organic material, she said, frowning at the display. Down that corridor. I nodded and adjusted our course. The corridor she indicated led toward what should be the station's small medical bay. The door was partially open, stuck about halfway. Kathleen, give me a hand with this, I said. Together we forced the door the rest of the way open. The smell hit us immediately. That unmistakable sweet-sour odor of decomposition. I'd encountered it before, but never in space. Bodies on stations were usually preserved by the cold, sterile environment. Oh God, Kathleen muttered, turning away. The body was slumped against the far wall, male, middle-aged, wearing an engineer's uniform. He'd been dead for some time. The flesh had begun to blacken and shrivel in places, while other areas showed the bloating of gases from decomposition. That's impossible, Beverly said, pushing past me with her scanner raised. The environmental systems are functioning. Temperature and humidity are controlled. He shouldn't be decomposing like this. I approached cautiously, kneeling a few feet from the body. ID badge says Marcus Rogers, station engineer. Beverly was running her scanner over the corpse, her expression growing increasingly confused. John, this makes no sense. These readings, according to this, different parts of his body are in different stages of decomposition. Some areas show decay consistent with 3 weeks, others with only days, and some appear to have been dead for months. That can't be right, Clyde said, standing in the doorway, keeping his distance. Run it again, I told her. Beverly adjusted something on her scanner and ran it over the body once more. Same results. It's as if time itself was moving at different rates throughout his body. I looked more closely at Rogers. His right arm was nearly skeletal, while his torso still retained most of its mass. His face was halfway between, one side sunken and mummified, the other still recognizably human. "Cause of death?" I asked. Beverly shook her head. "Hard to say with these anomalous decay patterns. No obvious trauma. No signs of asphyxiation. Heart appears intact, though severely degraded on one side. Could it be some kind of pathogen? Something that causes accelerated, uneven decomposition?" Clyde suggested. "I've never seen anything like it," Beverly replied, "and my scanner isn't detecting any known pathogens. I'd need to take samples back to the ship for a proper analysis." I nodded. "Do it, but full containment protocols." As Beverly prepared her sample kit, I searched Roger's pockets, finding a personal data device. The screen was cracked, but it powered up when I pressed the activation button. "Got something," I said, scrolling through the device. Last log entry was dated 17 days ago. "What's it say?" Kathleen asked, having composed herself enough to turn back around. "Reactor fluctuations increasing. Dr. Chen says it's nothing to worry about, but I don't like it. That humming sound is getting louder. Jenkins swears he saw something moving inside the chamber yesterday, but that's impossible with the radiation levels. Still, I'm going to run a full diagnostic tomorrow, authorized or not." I pocketed the device. Looks like they were having reactor problems. "That doesn't explain this." Clyde gestured at the body. "No, it doesn't." I stood up. "Beverly, finish getting your samples. The rest of us will check the residential section, see if we can find any survivors or more bodies." Beverly nodded, already focused on her work. "Kathleen, stay with her," I added. "Clyde, you're with me." We left the medical bay and headed toward the residential section. The corridors were dark and silent, our lamp beams creating moving shadows that seemed to follow us. "Captain," Clyde said quietly as we walked, "if there was a reactor malfunction, shouldn't we be detecting radiation?" "Yeah, we should." I checked my own scanner. But levels are normal. Whatever happened here, it wasn't a standard meltdown. The residential section consisted of 2 long hallways with individual quarters branching off. Standard design for this type of station, small, efficient living spaces for crew members who spent most of their time working anyway. The first room we checked was empty, bed made, personal items in place, no signs of struggle or hasty departure. It looked like whoever lived here had just stepped out and might return any minute. The second room told a different story. "Sir," Clyde called from the doorway. I joined him and immediately saw what had caught his attention. Another body, this one in the bed. Female, probably in her 30s. Same impossible decomposition pattern. Her legs were almost completely skeletonized, while her upper body showed less decay. "Check the other rooms," I ordered. We moved methodically down the corridor, finding 4 more bodies in similar states. Some were in beds, one at a desk, another in the small bathroom. All showed the same bizarre decomposition patterns. 6 bodies total in this section, Clyde reported after we'd checked the last room, all with the same condition. I was about to respond when Beverly's voice came through on the comm. "Captain, I've completed my preliminary analysis. You need to see this." "On our way," I replied. We found Beverly and Kathleen still in the medical bay. Beverly had set up a portable analysis station and was studying results on a small screen. "What have you got?" I asked. "It's not decomposition, at least not entirely," she said. "The cellular structure has been altered at a fundamental level. It's as if the molecular bonds themselves have been weakened or changed. I've never seen anything like it." "Could it be radiation?" Clyde suggested. Beverly shook her head. "Radiation damage has specific signatures. This is different. It's more like the matter itself is becoming unstable." "We found 5 more bodies in the residential section," I told her. "Same condition." "We need to check the rest of the station," Kathleen said. "There should be more crew members." I nodded. "Let's split up. Beverly, you and Kathleen check the common areas. Mess hall, recreation facilities. Clyde and I will take operations and engineering. Before we separated, I made sure everyone knew the protocol. Regular comm checks every 5 minutes. If you find anything unusual, and I mean anything, report it immediately. Don't touch anything you don't absolutely have to. The common areas yielded 3 more bodies, according to Kathleen's report. Operations had 2, one at the main console and another by the door, as if they'd been trying to leave when whatever happened occurred. The operations logs weren't much help. The last entry was from the station commander, dated 16 days ago. Reactor fluctuations continuing. Dr. Chen insists his experiment is not the cause, but I've ordered it shut down anyway. Too many unexplained occurrences lately. Jenkins still hasn't reported for duty. Marcus says he'll run a full diagnostic tomorrow. Sir, Kathleen's voice came through the comm, sounding strained. You need to see this. We're in Corridor C, Section 4. On our way, I replied. Corridor C turned out to be a secondary passage connecting the mess hall to the science labs. When we arrived, Kathleen was standing in front of a wall, her light illuminating what had caught her attention. Blood. Dark, dried blood smeared across the wall in large, jagged letters. They will come. Found it like this, Kathleen said, her voice tight. There's more down the corridor. She was right. Every few meters, another message was scrawled in the same dried blood. None left. The sphere calls. They will come. The messages repeated, sometimes overlapping, sometimes accompanied by symbols I didn't recognize, circles with lines radiating outward, spirals that seemed to twist into themselves. What the hell happened here? Clyde muttered. I had no answer. 20 years in space, and I'd never seen anything like this. Pirates left bodies, sometimes mutilated ones. Accidents left structural damage. Radiation poisoning left specific signs. This was something else entirely. The blood is human, Beverly confirmed, scanning one of the messages. Type O negative, consistent with one of the bodies we found in the common area. They wrote these as they were dying? Kathleen asked, horror evident in her voice. Or someone used their blood to write them after they died, Clyde suggested. Neither option was comforting. As we stood there, trying to make sense of the blood messages, my comm unit beeped with an incoming transmission. Captain, Jerome's voice came through, sounding unusually tense. We're picking up unusual energy readings from within the station, concentrated in what appears to be the engine room. What kind of readings? I asked. Nothing I've ever seen before, sir. Gravitational fluctuations, radiation spikes that appear and disappear, and something else I can't even classify. The instruments are having trouble making sense of it. I exchanged glances with Clyde. Keep monitoring. We'll check it out. Captain, Jerome added, be careful. These readings, they're not natural. Acknowledged. Mitchell out. I turned to the team. Change of plans. Beverly, take your samples back to the ship. I want a full analysis as soon as possible. Kathleen, you're with Clyde and me. We're going to check the engine room. Beverly nodded, gathering her equipment. What about quarantine protocols? Full decontamination before boarding, I assured her, and keep the samples isolated. After Beverly left, the 3 of us made our way toward the engine section. The corridor leading there was darker than the others, the emergency lighting flickering intermittently. Power fluctuations are stronger here, Kathleen noted, checking her scanner. Something's drawing a lot of energy. The door to the engine room was sealed, which was standard procedure for restricted areas. Kathleen bypassed the security with her engineering override, and the door slid open with a reluctant groan. Just as we were about to enter, my comm beeped again. Captain, Becker's voice came through, sounding urgent. We've found something in the engine room. You need to see this immediately. I frowned. Becker? I thought you were with us. There was a pause. No, sir. Sandoval and I split off to check the lower decks, remember? Munoz joined us about 10 minutes ago. I looked at Clyde, who seemed as confused as I was. We hadn't ordered any split in the team. Stand by, Becker. We're on our way. It took us less than 5 minutes to reach the lower-level access to the engine room. Becker was waiting at the entrance, his expression grim. Sandoval stood guard nearby, her weapon drawn but pointed downward. Munoz was hunched over a portable scanner, his face illuminated by its blue glow. "Report," I said as we approached. "Sir," Becker said, his voice lower than usual. "There's something in the reactor chamber, something that shouldn't be possible." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, he gestured for me to follow him. We entered the engine room proper, a large circular chamber dominated by what should have been the fusion reactor at its center. But the reactor wasn't there. In its place, floating about 3 feet off the floor, was a perfect sphere of absolute blackness. It was perhaps 6 feet in diameter, and it seemed to absorb all light that touched it. The darkness wasn't just black, it was an absence, a void that hurt to look at directly. "What the hell is that?" I whispered, though I'm not sure why I lowered my voice. "Unknown, sir," Becker replied. "It's where the reactor should be. Munoz has been taking readings, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. Munoz looked up from his scanner, his face pale in the dim light. "Captain, this object, if it even is an object, is generating impossible readings, gravitational distortions that should tear this station apart, radiation that appears and disappears from our sensors, and energy signatures I've never seen before." I approached cautiously, feeling a strange vibration through the deck plating. As I got closer, I could hear it, a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly in my bones. "How long has it been here?" I asked. "Based on the logs we found, it appeared approximately 17 days ago," Becker said. "Initially as a small anomaly within the reactor, then growing to replace it entirely." The sphere pulsated slightly, the perfect blackness seeming to intensify for a moment before returning to its previous state. The humming changed pitch with the pulsation, sending a shiver up my spine. "Is it affecting the rest of the station?" I asked. Munoz nodded, still staring at his readings. "The energy it's emitting corresponds to the decomposition patterns Dr. Ortiz found. It's as if it's distorting time and space around it. Different rates in different areas. Some places aging rapidly, others barely at all." "That explains the bodies," Kathleen murmured. "Sir," Munoz continued, his voice shaking slightly, "the readings are getting stronger. Whatever this thing is, it's becoming more active. The gravitational distortions are increasing." As if to emphasize his point, the sphere pulsated again, more strongly this time. The humming grew louder, and for a brief moment, I felt lightheaded, as if gravity itself had hiccuped. "We need to report this to command," Becker said. "This is beyond our capabilities." He was right. Whatever this sphere was, it wasn't something a patrol ship was equipped to handle. We needed specialists, scientists who understood gravitational anomalies and space-time distortions. "Agreed," I said, unable to tear my eyes away from the perfect blackness. "Munoz, gather all the data you can. Kathleen, see if there's any way to contain this thing, or at least stabilize it. Becker, you and I will..." The sphere pulsated again, more violently this time. The humming became a deep, resonant throb that I felt in my chest. The deck plates vibrated beneath our feet, and the lights flickered. "Captain," Munoz said, his voice rising in alarm, "the gravitational readings are spiking. It's pulling in energy from the surrounding area." I looked at the sphere, watching as it seemed to darken even further, if that was possible. The blackness was so complete it looked like a hole cut into reality itself, and it was growing. "Everyone out," I ordered. "Back to the ship. Now." No one argued. We turned and moved quickly toward the exit, but I couldn't help looking back one last time at the impossible sphere floating where a fusion reactor should be. Something about it seemed almost alive, pulsating with a rhythm that reminded me disturbingly of a heartbeat. As we retreated, Munoz continued monitoring his scanner. "Captain, the readings are off the scale. Whatever that thing is, it's not just distorting space and time, it's consuming it." "Kathleen?" I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at anything, really, just staring straight ahead with this glazed expression I'd never seen on her before. Something was very wrong. "Kathleen," I called again, louder this time. "Step back from there, now!" She didn't even blink, just kept moving toward that impossible black sphere floating where the reactor should have been, one slow step after another. Her face had gone slack, empty almost, like she'd checked out and left her body on autopilot. "McCormick!" I barked, using my command voice, the one that usually snapped people to attention instantly. Nothing, not even a twitch. The rest of us stood frozen for a second. You know that moment when your brain's still catching up to what your eyes are seeing? That's where we all were. Then Clyde moved first, lunging forward to grab her. "Don't touch her," Munoz shouted, his eyes glued to his scanner. "The gravitational distortion around her it's not normal, sir. I don't know what would happen." I stepped forward anyway. Couldn't just stand there and watch. "Kathleen, that's an order. Stop right now." She was maybe 10 feet from the sphere now, and I swear I could see the air around her starting to bend, like heat waves, but different, worse. Her outline wasn't quite right anymore. "Captain," she said suddenly, her voice distant and dreamy. First word she'd spoken since we entered the engine room. "It's beautiful. Can you hear it? It's singing to me." I couldn't hear anything except the blood pounding in my ears and the mechanical hum of the station's systems, but the way she said it sent ice straight through my veins. "There's nothing singing, Kathleen. Whatever you're hearing, it's not real." I took another step toward her, fighting against some invisible resistance. "We need to leave, now." Her head tilted slightly, almost childlike. "But it's calling me. Don't you understand? It needs me." She raised her hand toward the sphere, and that's when I saw it. Her fingers stretching, elongating in ways human fingers can't. The bones should have snapped, but instead they just kept going, like taffy being pulled. My stomach lurched. 22 years in space, and I'd never seen anything like it. Not in training simulations, not in deep space anomalies, not in the worst accidents I'd witnessed. "Everyone back!" I shouted, finally breaking through my own shock. "Munoz, call the ship. Tell them to prep for emergency evacuation." Munoz was already at it, his voice tight as he spoke rapidly into his comm. Clyde had his hand on his sidearm, though what good that would do against whatever this was, I had no idea. "Kathleen," I tried one more time, desperation making my voice crack. "Think about what you're doing." She turned then, just enough to look at me over her shoulder. For a second, I thought I saw the real Kathleen, my engineer, flash in her eyes, confused, maybe even scared. Then it was gone, replaced by that vacant stare. "It's okay, Captain," she said softly. "I understand now. This is where I'm supposed to be." She took the final step. What happened next? I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times, and it still doesn't make sense. Physics doesn't work that way. Bodies don't work that way. Her form stretched toward the sphere, not just reaching but actually extending, her entire body elongating impossibly. Her uniform, her skin, everything just pulled, like she was being siphoned through an invisible straw. There wasn't any blood, any tearing. Just this grotesque stretching as the sphere drew her in. I heard someone retching behind me. Might have been Clyde. Might have been me, for all I knew. I couldn't look away. The last thing to go was her face, stretched and distorted beyond recognition. But her eyes, God, her eyes were still aware at the end, wide with either wonder or terror. I'll never know which. Then she was gone, completely. No trace. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The sphere hung there, pulsing with that same rhythm we'd noticed before. Then it changed, expanded slightly, the surface rippling. The deck plates beneath our feet groaned, a deep structural sound that anyone who's served on ships or stations recognizes instantly. Metal under stress, about to fail. "Out!" I snapped out of it, military training kicking in. "Everyone out now! Back to the ship. Munoz's scanner was screaming with alerts. Captain, gravitational readings are spiking exponentially. The sphere is growing. I didn't need his scanner to tell me that. I could see it with my own eyes, the perfect blackness swelling like some cancerous growth. The air around it wavered and bent, distorting everything behind it. Move! I grabbed Munoz by the shoulder and shoved him toward the door. Clyde, take point! We ran. No shame in admitting that. We ran like hell. The corridor outside engineering wasn't stable anymore. The metal walls were buckling inward in places, creating these warped, twisted shapes that hadn't been there before. Lights flickered, and somewhere deep in the station's guts, something massive tore loose with a screech that set my teeth on edge. "The station's breaking up!" Clyde shouted over his shoulder, dodging a ceiling panel that crashed down inches from his head. "Keep moving!" I ordered, bringing up the rear, making sure no one fell behind. The floor beneath us shuddered violently, throwing me against a wall. My shoulder took the impact hard enough to make my eyes water. Didn't matter. Pain was secondary. Getting my people off this death trap was all that counted. The main corridor that had been straight when we arrived now curved unnaturally, bending in ways that made my brain hurt to look at. Spatial distortion. I'd read about it in theoretical papers, but never thought I'd see it firsthand. Wasn't sure I was seeing it now, really. Maybe my mind was just struggling to process what was happening. "Captain!" Munoz had his comm pressed to his ear. "Sandoval reports the station's structural integrity is failing everywhere. She and Dr. Ortiz are at the airlock. Tell them to get aboard and prep for emergency departure." I had to shout over the groaning metal and the sudden piercing shriek of emergency klaxons that had finally decided to activate. Another violent shudder ran through the station, stronger this time. I stumbled, caught myself on a railing that bent under my weight like it was made of rubber instead of steel. The sensation was so wrong, it sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through me. "The gravity's increasing," Munoz yelled, struggling to keep his footing. "It's pulling everything back toward engineering." He was right. I could feel it now. That inexorable tug, like walking upstream against a strengthening current. Each step away from engineering was harder than the last. Clyde had reached an intersection ahead, stopped to get his bearings. The station's layout had been simple when we boarded, but now nothing looked right. Corridors bent at impossible angles, doorways had shifted position. "This way," he called, pointing left. "I can see the main hub." I nodded, pushing Munoz ahead of me. "Go." We turned the corner and found ourselves facing a section of corridor that was wrong. The perspective was off, stretched and compressed simultaneously, like looking through a funhouse mirror. At the far end, I could see the main hub, or rather, what was left of it. The circular chamber was collapsing inward, the far wall already gone, leaving nothing but twisted metal framing and exposed wiring. "We can't go that way," I said, pulling Munoz back. "We need another route." Clyde checked his wrist display. "Maintenance tunnel, 2 sections back. It runs parallel to this corridor, should bypass the hub entirely. Lead the way." We backtracked, fighting against that growing pull every step of the way. The maintenance access was where Clyde said it would be, but the hatch was warped, jammed shut from whatever forces were tearing the station apart. "Stand back," I ordered, drawing my sidearm. 2 shots to the locking mechanism, and Clyde and I were able to force it open with our combined strength. The tunnel beyond was narrow, meant for repair crews and their equipment. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly red glow. At least it looked structurally sound, for now. "Go," I said, waving them in. "I'll bring up the rear." Clyde went first, then Munoz. I took one last look behind us, down the corridor toward engineering. What I saw froze me in place for a crucial second. The walls themselves were flowing, actually flowing, like melting wax being pulled back toward the sphere. The deck plates were rippling, buckling upward before being sucked backward. The entire station was being consumed piece by piece. Something struck my back, Munoz's hand, grabbing my uniform. "Captain, we have to move." I snapped out of it and ducked into the tunnel. We moved as fast as we could in the cramped space, half running, half crawling. The red emergency lights flickered ominously. Through the metal walls, I could hear the station dying, groaning, tearing, imploding. "How much farther?" I called to Clyde. 30 meters to the docking bay access, he replied, voice tight with exertion, assuming it's still where it's supposed to be. That was the question, wasn't it? Nothing else was where it should be anymore. The tunnel curved sharply, then ended at another maintenance hatch. This one, thankfully, opened without resistance. We spilled out into what should have been the corridor leading directly to the docking bay. Instead, we found ourselves in a nightmare of twisted architecture. The corridor walls had collapsed inward, creating a jagged, narrow passage barely wide enough for one person. The ceiling had partially caved in, forcing us to duck. Worst of all, the artificial gravity was completely destabilized here. I could feel myself being pulled in multiple directions at once, like being caught in competing tidal forces. I can see the airlock. Clyde pointed ahead, where the familiar outline of our docking collar was just visible through the wreckage. "It's still intact." A small miracle that. I wasn't about to question it. "Munoz, go," I ordered, bracing myself against a twisted support beam. "Clyde, help him through, then you follow." The pull from behind us was getting stronger by the second. Walking forward felt like trudging through deep mud. Munoz struggled ahead, using the exposed wall struts to pull himself forward. Clyde followed close behind, ready to grab him if he slipped. I brought up the rear, constantly glancing back. The destruction was following us, the corridor literally disintegrating in our wake. Whatever that sphere was doing, it was accelerating. Munoz reached the relatively intact section near the airlock first. Sandoval was there, bracing herself in the open doorway of our ship, hand extended. "Move your ass," she shouted, her usual professional demeanor abandoned in the crisis. "This whole place is coming apart." I could see Dr. Ortiz behind her, already aboard the Erickson, frantically waving us in. Munoz stumbled the last few meters and practically fell into Sandoval's arms. She hauled him aboard with a strength that belied her size. Clyde was next, moving with the efficient precision that had made him my first officer. He reached the airlock just as a violent shudder ran through the entire station. The deck plates beneath him buckled suddenly, pitching him forward. He barely caught the edge of the airlock with his fingertips. Sandoval lunged, grabbing his wrist. "Got you!" I was maybe 10 meters behind, fighting against what felt like hurricane-force winds pulling me backward. Metal groaned and twisted all around me. A support beam tore loose from the ceiling, missing my head by inches. "Captain!" Clyde had regained his footing inside the airlock, was reaching back for me. "Hurry!" I forced myself forward, one excruciating step at a time. The pull was so strong now that I had to grab onto exposed piping, structural supports, anything to keep from being yanked backward. My muscles screamed with the effort. 5 meters. The ship was right there. I could see Munoz at the bridge controls through the airlock, already initiating emergency undocking procedures. Smart man. 3 meters. A section of wall to my right suddenly crumpled like paper, exposing the station's skeleton. Through the gap, I caught a glimpse of the void beyond, and something else, something massive and dark expanding through the station's midsection. 1 meter. Sandoval and Clyde both had their arms extended, reaching for me. Behind them, Dr. Ortiz was strapping herself into a jump seat, her face pale with fear. With one final lunge, I grabbed Clyde's outstretched hand. He and Sandoval hauled me through the airlock like I weighed nothing, adrenaline giving them extra strength. "Seal it," I gasped as soon as I was through. "Munoz, get us out of here." Sandoval slammed her palm against the emergency control panel. The airlock door slid shut with a hiss of hydraulics, then locked with a solid thunk that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "Docking clamps released," Munoz reported from the bridge, thrusters online, pushing off in 3, 2, 1. The Erickson shuddered as the maneuvering thrusters fired, pushing us away from the doomed station. I staggered to the bridge, Clyde right behind me, and strapped into my chair. "Full power to engines," I ordered. "Get us to safe distance." Clyde took his station, hands flying over the controls. "Aye, Captain. Main engines online." The view screen showed the station behind us, and what I saw defied comprehension. The entire structure was collapsing inward, folding like origami in the hands of an invisible giant. At the center of it all was the sphere, no longer just black, but somehow darker than dark, a hole in reality itself, growing larger as it consumed the station. "Munoz, what are we looking at?" My voice sounded steady. "Good. The crew needed that right now." He shook his head, eyes wide as he stared at his readings. "I don't know, sir. The gravitational readings are off the charts. It's like a singularity, but it shouldn't be possible, not without a massive stellar collapse." "How far do we need to get?" I asked. "Based on current expansion rate." He worked his console frantically. "At least 50,000 kilometers to be safe." "Clyde, already on it, Captain. Maximum thrust. ETA to safe distance. 4 minutes. 4 minutes. An eternity when you're running from something you don't understand." I kept my eyes on the view screen. The station was almost completely gone now, crushed into itself around that growing darkness. As I watched, the last recognizable sections, the habitat ring, the communications array, twisted and vanished, pulled into that impossible void. Then, abruptly, it stopped. The sphere pulsed once, twice, a final time, and collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but empty space and scattered debris where a station had been moments before. "Munoz?" I didn't take my eyes off the screen. "Gravitational readings returning to normal, sir," he reported, sounding as stunned as I felt. "Whatever it was, it's gone." The bridge fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. We just stared at the emptiness on the screen, trying to process what we'd just witnessed. Kathleen was gone. The station was gone, and we had no explanation for any of it. "Maintain course," I finally said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "I want us at least 1,000,000 kilometers from that location before we even think about slowing down." "Aye, Captain," Clyde responded automatically. I unstrapped from my chair, legs unsteady beneath me. "I'll be in my quarters. I need to file an incident report." No one questioned me. They all knew the protocols as well as I did. Major incidents required immediate documentation while memories were fresh, especially when crew were lost. I made it to my quarters somehow, closed the door behind me, and just stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing. My hands were trembling. Delayed reaction, probably. Adrenaline wearing off. Eventually, I moved to my desk, activated my terminal, and began the report. The cursor blinked at me accusingly as I tried to find words to describe what we'd just experienced. How do you explain watching a member of your crew being absorbed by an impossible sphere of nothingness? How do you account for a station folding in on itself like it was made of paper instead of reinforced titanium and steel? I started typing anyway. Dates, times, coordinates. The facts as I observed them, as clinical and detached as I could make them. Kathleen McCormick, engineer, lost in the line of duty while investigating an unknown phenomenon. Cause of death, unknown. Omega-7 station destroyed by same phenomenon. Nature of phenomenon, unknown. Unknown, unknown, unknown. The word mocked me as I typed it over and over. 22 years of service, and I had no frame of reference for what I'd just witnessed. Nothing in my training, nothing in the regulations, nothing in human experience prepared me for watching a woman I was responsible for stretch like putty and vanish into a perfect sphere of darkness. I attached Munoz's sensor readings, incomplete as they were, added Clyde's navigational data showing the station's disappearance, included Dr. Ortiz's preliminary medical report on the bodies we'd found before everything went to hell. When I was done, I set course for Earth and transmitted the report to command with highest priority encryption. Then I just sat there, staring at the confirmation message blinking on my screen. Kathleen was gone. Just gone. And I had no idea what had taken her. I'd been sitting in this chair for 40 minutes now. Hard plastic, government issue, designed to look comfortable without actually being comfortable. The kind that makes your back hurt just enough to keep you on edge. The office was nothing special. Gray walls, no windows, fluorescent lights that hummed just a little too loud. A camera in the corner with its red eye staring at me. 2 weeks since Omega-7, and I still jumped at shadows. Still saw Kathleen's face stretching into that thing. Still woke up sweating. Director Monica Hall sat across from me, reading through my report for what had to be the third time. She hadn't said a word in 15 minutes, just turned pages, occasionally making a note with her stylus on her tablet. Her silver-gray hair was cut in this perfect bob that didn't move, not even when she tilted her head. I cleared my throat. Director, I've answered every question, submitted a complete report. My crew has been debriefed. Is there something else you need from me? She didn't look up, just held up one finger in this dismissive gesture that made my jaw clench. I'd commanded ships for 12 years, led rescue missions in the outer belt, saved lives, and now I was being treated like some cadet who'd shown up late to formation. Finally, she set the tablet down and looked at me. Her eyes were cold, clinical, like she was examining a specimen. "Captain Mitchell," she said, her voice as sterile as the room, "I've reviewed your account of the events at the coordinates you provided." And I shifted in my seat. The bruise on my hip from getting slammed into the airlock was still tender. "And I'm afraid there's a significant problem with your report." She folded her hands on the desk. Perfect posture, not a wrinkle in her black suit. "What problem?" "There is no station designated Omega-7 in that sector. There never has been." I stared at her. The words didn't make sense at first, like she'd suddenly started speaking another language. "What are you talking about?" "We received a distress signal. We docked with the station. We found bodies. I stopped, the image of Kathleen being pulled into that sphere flashing through my mind. "I lost a crew member there." "I understand you believe that, Captain." Her voice hadn't changed. Same tone, same volume, like she was reading a grocery list. "But official records show no such installation." "That's impossible. We have sensor readings, navigation logs. My entire crew can verify." "Your crew has already been debriefed and reassigned to other vessels." She picked up her tablet again, swiped to a new screen. "They've all signed the appropriate documentation." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Reassigned? Without my knowledge or approval? That's not standard procedure following exposure to classified experiments, Captain Mitchell." That stopped me cold. Classified experiments. The words hung in the air between us. What experiments? I leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of her desk. "Are you telling me you knew about that sphere?" She didn't flinch at my tone or my posture, just looked at me with those empty eyes. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the nature of the research conducted. What I can tell you is that your crew's encounter was unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected." The realization hit me like a physical blow. We were test subjects. Someone had known about the sphere. Someone had sent us there deliberately. "You sent us in blind." My voice came out hoarse. "You let Kathleen die." Engineer McCormick's death was regrettable. She said it like she was commenting on a minor scheduling inconvenience. "The official record will show she died in a shuttle accident during routine maintenance." "That's a lie." I was on my feet now, not remembering standing up. "She was pulled into that thing. It changed her, distorted her, and you knew it could happen." "Please sit down, Captain Mitchell." She didn't raise her voice, but something in it made me sink back into my chair. Your emotional response is understandable, but unnecessary. You were selected for this mission precisely because of your record, your ability to handle unexpected situations, your loyalty to your crew. My loyalty? I almost laughed. I couldn't save her. I couldn't do anything. And yet you got the rest of your crew out safely. You documented the phenomenon thoroughly. She nodded at the tablet. Your report, despite its obvious emotional components, provides valuable data. How many others? I asked, the question burning in my throat. How many other crews have you sent to that thing, or to others like it? Her expression didn't change, but she tapped her finger once on the desk. A tell, maybe. The first human gesture I'd seen from her. That information is classified at the highest level. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a document. Actual paper. Old school. Which brings us to the matter at hand. She slid it across to me. Non-disclosure agreement. The government seal embossed at the top. Pages of legal text. You want me to sign this? It wasn't a question. It's required, yes. In exchange, you'll be reassigned to a comfortable position at command. Administrative duties. Training new captains. Your experience is valuable, Captain Mitchell. I stared at the document. And if I don't sign? If I tell people what really happened? For the first time, she smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Who would believe you? A captain claiming his engineer was consumed by a mysterious black sphere that defies the laws of physics. A station that, according to all official records, never existed. She leaned forward slightly. Best case scenario, you'd be labeled unstable. Psychological discharge. Worst case, you'd face charges for falsifying reports, misappropriation of government resources. She paused. Or you could simply disappear. There are places we send people who pose security risks, Captain. Remote outposts where no one asks questions about new arrivals. The threat wasn't even subtle. I looked down at the agreement again, seeing my options vanish one by one. You understand the choice before you, she said. Not a question, a statement of fact. I did understand. Sign, and I'd get a desk job. Keep my rank, my pension. Live with the knowledge that we'd been used, that Kathleen's death was covered up, or refuse, and lose everything. Maybe even my freedom. What about the sphere? What happens when it expands again, when it takes more people? That's being handled. She pushed a pen toward me, old-fashioned, like the paper. Your role in this matter is concluded, Captain Mitchell. All that remains is for you to decide if you wish to continue your career or end it. I took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. Real ink, not the digital styluses we used on the ship. The kind of pen you sign important things with. Career-ending things. Life-changing things. My crew. I looked up at her. You said they've been reassigned. Where? Different vessels, different sectors. She checked something on her tablet. Dr. Ortiz has accepted a position at the medical facility on Europa. Officer Munoz is now stationed on the Hermes. Officer Becker has been promoted to first officer on the Gagarin. All scattered, all separated. No chance for us to compare notes or support each other's stories. Clever. They've all signed agreements like this one? She nodded once. They have. They understood the situation. I wondered what she'd said to them, what threats or promises she'd made, if they'd fought back or just accepted it. I thought about Clyde, steady Clyde, who'd tried to grab Kathleen, who'd helped drag me through that airlock when the station was collapsing. Had he just nodded and signed, or had he argued, demanded answers like I was doing? Didn't matter now. They were gone, reassigned, silenced. I looked down at the agreement. The text swam before my eyes, legal jargon designed to trap and bind. I skimmed enough to get the gist. I would never speak of Omega-7, never mention the sphere, never contact my former crew about the incident, never write or record anything about what I'd seen. Kathleen's death would be recorded as a shuttle accident, and I would support that story if ever questioned. In return, I'd keep my rank and get a cushy desk job at command, training new captains, pushing papers, safe. What happens to the next crew? I asked, pen still hovering over the signature line. The next ship that picks up a distress call from a station that doesn't exist? That's not your concern anymore, Captain. Her voice had an edge now, impatience, the first crack in her perfect facade. It is my concern. Those are my people out there, other captains, other crews. If you're running experiments with this thing, they deserve to know what they're walking into. The situation is contained. She tapped her finger on the desk again. Definitely a tell. The anomaly is being studied under controlled conditions. What happened to your crew was an unexpected escalation that has since been addressed. Bullshit. The word felt good coming out. Real. Human. Something this sterile room couldn't contain. You don't have it contained. You don't even understand what it is. It ate a station, Director Hall. It consumed my engineer. There was nothing controlled about that. Your opinion on the matter is noted. She glanced at her watch. However, we're running short on time. I need your decision, Captain Mitchell. Sign the agreement or face the consequences of refusal. I looked at the pen in my hand, thought about Kathleen, about her face as that thing pulled her in, the awareness in her eyes, right to the end. She knew what was happening. She felt it. And now I was supposed to agree that she died in a shuttle accident, a footnote in some fabricated report. Her family would never know the truth. Her sacrifice meant nothing. But what choice did I have? If I refused to sign, I'd be discredited, discharged, maybe worse, and the truth would still never come out. I signed my name. The pen scratched against the paper, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Captain Jonathan Mitchell, signing away the truth, signing away Kathleen's real story, signing away my integrity. Hall took the agreement, checked my signature, and nodded with satisfaction. A wise decision, Captain. She pressed her thumb against a small scanner on the corner of the document, officially witnessing and recording my surrender. When do I start my new position? I asked, feeling hollow. You'll report to Admiral Chen on Monday, 0800. She slipped the agreement into a folder. You'll be briefed on your new responsibilities then, and my personal effects from the Erickson. Already transferred to your new quarters. She stood up, our meeting clearly over. Building 7, Officer Housing Complex. Your access has been updated. I stood too, legs stiff from sitting so long in that uncomfortable chair. Is there anything else, Director? Just one thing. She fixed me with those cold eyes. This conversation never happened, Captain Mitchell. You were debriefed about the unfortunate shuttle accident that claimed Engineer McCormick's life. You accepted your promotion to a training position, that's all. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. You're dismissed. I turned and walked to the door, feeling her eyes on my back the whole way. The security scanner beeped, recognizing my clearance, and the door slid open. I stepped into the hallway, the door closing behind me with a soft hiss. The hallway was empty, sterile. More gray walls and fluorescent lights. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened, trying to accept that this was it. The truth buried, Kathleen's real fate erased, my crew scattered. The walk through the government building felt endless. More security checkpoints. More blank-faced personnel who wouldn't meet my eyes. I wondered how many of them knew about Omega-7, about the sphere, about other experiments like it. How many were complicit in the cover-up? Outside, the sky was overcast. Typical Seattle weather, gray and threatening rain. The air smelled clean after the recycled atmosphere of the building. I stood on the steps, looking at the people walking by. Normal people with normal jobs who had no idea what was happening out there in the darkness of space, what their government was messing with. I thought about Kathleen again, about her eyes as that thing took her. about how I'd have to look her parents in the face someday and tell them she died in a shuttle accident. A lie. I checked my comm unit. My access had already been updated, showing my new security clearance, my new assignment, my new housing location. They'd wasted no time. The Ericsson was already gone from my profile, listed under previous assignments. 15 years on that ship, and now it was just an entry in my service record. I walked down the steps, joining the flow of pedestrians. No one gave me a second glance in my uniform, just another officer going about his business. But inside, I felt crushed by the weight of a truth I could never speak, by the knowledge that we had been nothing but test subjects, by the certainty that somewhere out there, that sphere was still growing, still hungry, and that sooner or later another crew would encounter it or something like it. And they'd never see it coming, just like we didn't. I never thought I'd become the office ghost. That's what they called me behind my back. I wasn't supposed to know, but you hear things. The guy who stared at screens too long, the captain who never went back to space. 3 years at a desk job does things to you. My uniform still fit perfectly, I made sure of that, but everything else had changed. Command headquarters wasn't meant for people like me. The recycled air tasted stale. The fluorescent lighting gave everything a sickly glow. The constant hum of conversation and typing and shuffling papers drove me crazy some days. I'd been given an office in the back corner of the administrative wing. Nice window view of the parking lot. Very prestigious. My job title was Logistics Operations Supervisor, which meant I approved supply routes and reviewed cargo manifests. Thrilling stuff after 15 years of deep space rescue operations. I pulled up another manifest on my screen. Medical supplies bound for Ganymede Station. Everything looked in order. I hit approve and leaned back in my chair. 3 more hours till I could go home to my empty apartment. Captain Mitchell. I looked up. Hadn't heard anyone come in. A young ensign stood in my doorway, back straight, eyes forward. Couldn't have been more than 25. Just Mitchell now, I said. Or John, if you want. Haven't been a captain in a while. The ensign didn't relax. Sir, Director Haynes requested these files be delivered to you personally. He held out a data stick. I took it, turning it over in my hand. What's on it? I wasn't informed, sir. Just told to deliver it directly to you. Thanks, I said. The ensign saluted, completely unnecessary, and left. I waited until the door closed before plugging the stick into my terminal. Probably just another batch of supply routes that needed special attention. But Haynes didn't usually send things by messenger. That was odd. The screen populated with files, not supply routes, personnel records, missing persons reports, incident logs from ships that had gone dark. My heart rate picked up. This wasn't official work. This was my other project, my real work. I'd been collecting these files for almost 3 years now. Started small at first, just trying to find out more about what happened on Omega 7, about what happened to Kathleen. But the deeper I dug, the more I found. And the more I found, the more convinced I became that what we encountered wasn't an isolated incident. I scrolled through the files. Most I already had. But there at the bottom, 5 new incident reports, all classified, all involving ships that had gone missing in deep space. I glanced at my office door. It was closed, but not locked. Anyone could walk in. I got up and turned the lock, then went back to my desk. The first report detailed the disappearance of the Venture, a research vessel, 18 months ago. Official report said they suffered catastrophic engine failure. But the black box data told a different story. The chief engineer's final log entry mentioned unusual energy readings, gravitational fluctuations, the same kind of readings Jerome had detected on Omega 7. I opened the next file. The Artemis, a mining survey ship, disappeared 14 months ago. Again, the official story was mechanical failure. But there was a transmission, heavily redacted, where the captain reported a sphere of absolute darkness in an abandoned mining facility. My mouth went dry. I hadn't seen those words in any official document before. The pattern repeated through all 5 reports. ships sent to investigate anomalies, ships that found something they shouldn't have, ships that never returned, and none of it was supposed to exist, just like Omega-7 never existed. I checked the source code on the files, trying to figure out who had accessed them and how they'd gotten to me. The trace led nowhere. Whoever sent these knew how to cover their tracks. But I had a pretty good idea who it was. Clyde Becker, my former first officer, had been reassigned to internal security, which gave him access to classified files. We hadn't spoken since that day in Hall's office, but every few months, files would appear in my system, never with a note, never with any explanation. Just breadcrumbs for me to follow. I copied the files to my personal encrypted drive and removed the data stick. Then I pulled up the supply manifests again, just in case someone walked in. When my shift ended, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I went to a small diner 6 blocks from headquarters. The kind of place career officers never visited. The kind of place where conversations got lost in the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the grill. I took my usual booth in the back corner and ordered coffee. Black, no sugar. The waitress, Maggie, 50-something with hair that had been red 20 years ago, didn't even ask anymore, just brought it over with a tired smile. "Working late again, John?" I nodded. "You know how it is. You military types. All work, no fun." She shook her head and moved on to the next table. I pulled out my personal tablet, not connected to any network. Couldn't risk it. I'd learned that lesson early on. The files from today went into my growing database. 3 years of collection had yielded patterns I couldn't ignore. 17 incidents spanning 25 years, all with similar characteristics: unusual energy readings, gravitational anomalies, spheres of darkness, and all of them buried under official stories about mechanical failures or pilot error or tragic accidents. I added notes to each new file, cross-referencing them with others in my collection. The Artemis had disappeared in the same sector where the Horizon had reported gravitational disturbances 2 years earlier. The Venture's last known coordinates were less than a parsec from where we'd found Omega-7. These weren't coincidences. Someone was sending ships to investigate these phenomena. Someone knew what was out there. I sipped my coffee and stared at the screen. The question that had haunted me for 3 years still had no answer. What was that thing? And why was the government covering it up? My tablet pinged softly. A new message had arrived on my secure channel, the one not even Becker knew about. I opened it. It was heavily encrypted, but my decryption software got through it in a few seconds. The message was brief. "Found something. Project Sphere. 50 years of research. We need to talk. Same place as last time. Tomorrow, 2100. It was signed simply B, Beverly Ortiz, our ship's doctor. She'd been reassigned to a research facility on Mars after Omega-7. We'd stayed in touch, carefully. She'd been doing her own digging, using her medical clearance to access research files I couldn't get near. Project Sphere, the name sent a chill through me. 50 years of research. That meant they knew. They'd known all along what that thing was. I deleted the message and cleared the log. Then I finished my coffee, left some cash on the table, and headed home. My apartment was on the 20th floor of a nondescript building on the edge of the military district. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom, small kitchen, living area with a view of the city skyline. I kept it clean and organized out of habit. Military precision doesn't just disappear when you're grounded. I secured the door behind me and went straight to my bedroom. The loose panel in the closet floor came up easily. Inside the small cavity was a lockbox. Inside the lockbox was everything I'd collected on Omega-7 and the other incidents. Hard copies, because paper can't be hacked. I added today's findings to the growing stack. Then I pulled out a file I hadn't looked at in months. It contained the redacted documents I'd managed to piece together from various sources. Most were just fragments, but together they painted a disturbing picture. One document, dated 30 years ago, mentioned gravitational singularity containment and extra-dimensional research. Another referred to specimens collected from incident sites and cellular restructuring consistent with dimensional shift. The language was deliberately obscure, but I'd spent enough time with these documents to read between the lines. They were studying the spheres, had been for decades, and whatever they'd learned, they didn't want anyone else to know. I put everything back in the lockbox, replaced it in the floor cavity, and covered it with the panel. Then I went to the kitchen and poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey. Didn't usually drink during the week, but some nights called for it. The whiskey burned going down. I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Beverly was waiting to meet me tomorrow night. Somewhere out there, Clyde was risking his career to send me classified files. And somewhere much farther away, that sphere, or others like it, was still growing, still hungry. Sleep didn't come easily that night. It hadn't for 3 years. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kathleen's face as she was pulled into that darkness. Saw her fingers stretching, her body distorting. Heard her voice telling me it was beautiful, that it was singing to her. I woke up at 0500, drenched in sweat, showered, dressed, and was at my desk by 0630. No one noticed. No one ever did. The day crawled by. I approved shipments, reviewed route changes, signed off on crew rotations, all the while thinking about what Beverly might have found. Project Sphere. The name itself was an admission. They knew what these things were, had given them a designation, which meant they'd encountered more than one. At 1800, I left the office, went home, changed into civilian clothes, and headed out again. The meeting spot was a small park near the edge of the city, far enough from headquarters to avoid casual observation, but public enough that we wouldn't draw attention. I arrived 30 minutes early and did a careful sweep of the area. Old habits. Found a bench with a good view of all approaches and settled in to wait. 2100 came and went. No sign of Beverly. By 2130, I was getting concerned. Beverly was punctual to a fault. If she said 2100, she meant 2100. I tried her secure channel. No response. Tried again at 2200. Still nothing. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. The same feeling I'd had on Omega 7 when things started going sideways. I left the park and found a public terminal several blocks away. Used a scrambled connection to access news feeds. Nothing about Beverly Ortiz. Nothing about any incidents involving medical researchers. I went home, uneasy, but telling myself there could be a dozen innocent explanations. Maybe she'd been called into emergency surgery. Maybe her transport had been delayed. Maybe her message had been intercepted and she'd had to go dark. The next morning, I arrived at work to find a message from Director Haynes. Routine staff meeting at 0900. I didn't think much of it until I walked into the conference room and saw the faces. Grim, quiet. The kind of faces people wear when they're about to deliver bad news. Director Haynes stood at the head of the table. Before we begin today's agenda, I have a somber announcement to make. Dr. Beverly Ortiz, formerly of the Erickson, passed away last night in an unfortunate home accident. Medical services were called, but they were unable to revive her. The room blurred around me. An unfortunate home accident. The exact same language they'd used for Kathleen. A cover story. A lie. Dr. Ortiz was a valued member of our medical research community, Haynes continued. Her contributions to xenobiology will not be forgotten. A memorial service will be held next week. Details will be circulated to those who wish to attend. I sat through the rest of the meeting in a daze. No one looked at me directly. No one mentioned that Beverly and I had served together, had seen things together, had lost people together. They'd killed her. I was certain of it. She'd found something about Project Sphere, something they couldn't allow to get out, and they'd silenced her. And they knew I'd been in contact with her. Had to know. Which meant they were watching me too. Had probably been watching me all along. I went through the motions for the rest of the day. Approved shipments, reviewed manifests. All while my mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. That night, I didn't go home. Instead, I went to a public terminal and booked passage on a transport to Proxima Colony. Used cash, not my military ID. Then I went to another terminal in a different district and sent a message to my sister on Europa. Told her I was coming to visit, that I'd explain when I arrived. I didn't go to Beverly's memorial service. Couldn't bear to sit there among people who knew what had happened to her, who were part of the system that had killed her. Instead, I submitted my retirement papers, cited health reasons, said I needed a quieter life after years of service. No one questioned it. Director Haynes even seemed relieved, signing off on my request the same day. "You've earned your rest, Mitchell," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I spent my last week at command putting my affairs in order, sold most of my belongings, packed what I couldn't part with into 2 duffel bags, made arrangements for my pension to be transferred to an account on Proxima Colony. The night before my departure, I retrieved my lockbox from its hiding place, everything I'd collected over 3 years. All the evidence of what was really out there. I couldn't leave it behind, but I couldn't risk carrying it through security either. In the end, I scanned everything to a heavily encrypted drive small enough to hide in the heel of my boot. The originals I burned in my sink, 1 page at a time. Watched 3 years of work turn to ash. But the knowledge that I couldn't burn, that came with me. The transport left Earth at 0600. I sat by a window, watching the planet fall away beneath me. Somewhere down there, in a nondescript government building, Monica Hall was probably receiving a report about my departure, probably smiling that cold smile of hers, thinking she'd won. Maybe she had, but I was still alive, still had the evidence. And on Proxima Colony, far from Earth's direct control, maybe I'd find a way to use it. Maybe I'd find others who'd encountered the spheres and lived to tell about it. Maybe I'd finally get answers. Or maybe I'd just live out my days in quiet exile, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering when they'd decide I was too much of a risk to leave alive. The transport jumped to FTL, and Earth disappeared from view. I closed my eyes, seeing Kathleen's face one more time, seeing Beverly as I imagined her in her final moments, cornered by agents who'd come to silence her. I was running. I knew that. But sometimes running is the only way to stay alive long enough to fight another day. I slipped into the admin building through a service entrance. Security protocols were looser for maintenance workers than for visitors, something I'd noticed early on in my 3-year sentence-pushing manifests. Nobody looks twice at the person carrying tools. The weight of the recorder in my pocket felt like a gamble. I'd bought it with cash from a pawn shop 2 days ago. Analog tech, nothing connected to networks. Old school. Harder to detect, harder to hack. Hall's office was on the 32nd floor, executive wing. I took the service elevator to 31, then the stairs up the final flight. My heart was going pretty fast by then. Not from the stairs. The hallway was empty. It was almost midnight. I'd tracked Hall's schedule for weeks now. Tuesday nights she worked late, always alone after 10. I stood outside her door for a moment, checking my watch. My transport to the spaceport left in 3 hours. Everything I owned that mattered was in a duffel bag stored in a locker at the transit station. Wasn't much. I'd been living like a ghost for years anyway. I knocked. "Enter." Her voice hadn't changed. Still that flat, cold tone that made you feel like you were wasting her time just by existing. I pushed open the door. Her office was exactly as I remembered. Minimalist, gray walls, a desk that probably cost more than my annual salary. The view behind her showed the lights of the city, a government sector that never really slept. Hall looked up from her tablet. If she was surprised to see me, she didn't show it. Nothing ever seemed to surprise Monica Hall. "Captain Mitchell." She set the tablet down. "This is unexpected." "I'm not a captain anymore," I said. "You saw to that." She gestured to the chair across from her desk, the same hard plastic chair I'd sat in 3 years ago when she'd stripped away my command and my dignity in one efficient meeting. I didn't sit. "I'm not staying long." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Then state your business." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small data drive, tossed it onto her desk. "Project Sphere," I said. That's what it's called, isn't it? Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a calculation happening behind them. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Sure you do. I stepped closer to her desk. Artificial singularity research started about 30 years ago. The government was trying to create miniature black holes as energy sources, or weapons, probably both. Hall's hand moved slightly toward her desk drawer. I knew what was in there, probably a panic button, maybe a weapon. I wouldn't, I said. Not yet. You'll want to hear what I know first. She paused, then folded her hands on top of the desk. Continue. Something went wrong with the experiments. The artificial singularities became unstable. Or maybe they worked too well. Either way, they couldn't be contained. So instead of shutting down the project, you moved it off-world, remote stations, places nobody would notice. I took another step forward. Places like Omega-7. You signed a non-disclosure agreement, Mitchell. Her voice had dropped a few degrees colder. Breaking it has serious consequences. I laughed. Actually laughed. Didn't feel much humor in it, though. Consequences? You mean like what happened to Beverly Ortiz? Found dead in her apartment from an apparent suicide. The woman never had a depressed day in her life. Hall didn't respond. Or what about Jerome Munoz, transferred to Deep Space Communications relay duty? Man hasn't been heard from in 2 years. His family's been told he's on a classified assignment. I pulled out the chair now and sat down, leaned forward. Here's what I've pieced together. You've been monitoring these singularities for decades, sending crews out to check on them, take readings. When containment fails, you write off the losses, classify everything, make people disappear. Hall's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tightened slightly against each other. You're making serious accusations based on conspiracy theories, Mitchell. I expected better from someone with your service record. I have the logs, I said. Ship disappearances dating back 27 years, all with the same pattern. Unusual energy readings, communications blackouts, and then nothing. The Venture, the Artemis, the Hawking, all gone, all covered up. I tapped the data drive on her desk. It's all there, along with the transmissions that weren't quite scrubbed clean enough. References to spheres, to darkness that consumes. Sound familiar? Hall was silent for a long moment. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the environmental system. What do you want, Mitchell? She finally asked. The truth, I said. For once. She studied me, those cold blue eyes calculating risk and reward. The truth, she repeated, almost like she was testing how the word felt. And what would you do with this truth? Depends on what it is. Hall stood up and walked to the window. The city lights reflected off her silver-gray hair. Some knowledge is dangerous, Mitchell. Not because it's false, but because it's true. She turned to face me. There are things humanity isn't ready to confront. Like what happened to Kathleen? I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. Like what happened to my crew? Your engineer made a choice. She was influenced. That thing was in her head. Yes, Hall said simply. It was. The admission caught me off guard. I'd expected more denial, more bureaucratic stonewalling. So you know what these spheres are? I said. We know what they do. We know some of what they're capable of. We don't fully understand what they are. She returned to her desk but remained standing. The first one appeared 29 years ago in a laboratory on Europa. It was small at first, just a few centimeters in diameter. The scientists thought they'd created something remarkable. And had they? No. Her voice was flat. They'd opened a door. Or perhaps more accurately, they'd created a beacon. Something noticed. I felt a chill run through me. Something from where? We don't know. Another dimension, another universe. Perhaps somewhere else entirely. Hall sat down again. What we do know is that these spheres consume energy, matter, light. They grow, and they're intelligent in ways we can't comprehend. I thought about Kathleen, the way she'd looked at that sphere, like she was hearing something beautiful, something calling to her. "How many are there?" I asked. Hall hesitated. "How many?" I repeated, louder this time. 17 that we've identified, she said, across known space, each one growing, slowly, but steadily. The number hit me like a physical blow. 17? And you're just monitoring them? Watching them grow? We're containing them as best we can, studying them, trying to understand how to neutralize them. By sending unsuspecting crews to their deaths? I asked. By gathering data, she corrected. Every encounter provides information we need. I stood up, unable to sit still with the weight of what she was telling me. These aren't experiments gone wrong, are they? This isn't about some government project that failed. Hall watched me, her expression unreadable. These things, I continued, they're not from here. They're not our creation. They're something else, something that's found its way in. Yes, she said simply. And they're spreading. She nodded once. Jesus Christ. I ran a hand through my hair. You're talking about an invasion. Not in the conventional sense, but yes, our reality is being colonized, slowly. I turned back to her. And you've kept this secret? While more of these things appear? While they grow stronger? What would you have us do, Mitchell? Announce to humanity that an incomprehensible force is consuming our universe bit by bit? That we have no effective means to stop it? That would cause global panic, collapse of governments, religious upheaval, and it wouldn't help us solve the problem. She leaned forward. We need time, we need resources, we need to understand what we're dealing with. And in the meantime, more people die, more ships go missing. I shook my head. More Kathleens. Sacrifices are necessary in war. Is that what this is? A war? What else would you call it? She asked. I paced the office, trying to process everything. 17 spheres, growing, spreading. An alien invasion not of creatures we could fight, but of something that consumed reality itself. I want to see the data, I said. All of it. Everything you have on these spheres. Hall laughed, a short, humorless sound. That's not going to happen. Then I go public with what I have. No one will believe you. You'll be dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, a disgruntled former captain who couldn't handle a desk job. Maybe, I said, but I have evidence, logs, transmissions. Enough to raise questions. Enough to start people looking in the right places. Hall's expression hardened. I can't allow that. You can't stop me. Actually, I can. She pressed a button on her desk. Security is already on its way. You'll be detained, evaluated for mental instability. Your evidence will be confiscated. I smiled. I figured you'd do something like that. That's why the originals aren't on me. They're already in the hands of people who will release them if I don't check in regularly. It was a bluff, but a good one, I thought. Hall studied me. You're lying. Want to take that chance? I asked. Want to risk the whole world finding out what's really happening out there? She was silent for a moment, considering. I'll make you an offer, Mitchell, she said finally. Join us. Work with the containment team. Your experience with the sphere is valuable. You've seen one up close. You've witnessed its effects. Help us understand them. Help us fight them. I stared at her. You want me to work for you, after everything you've done? I want you to help save humanity, she replied. Personal feelings aside, that's what's at stake here. And if I refuse, then you disappear. Her voice was matter of fact. Permanently. We can't risk what you know becoming public. I heard the elevator down the hall chime. Security arriving. So, those are my choices? I asked. Join you or die? Those are the choices reality has given us all, she said. Fight or be consumed. I reached into my pocket slowly. Hall tensed, but I wasn't reaching for a weapon. There's a third option, I said, pulling out the small recorder. I go public. I tell everyone what's happening. Maybe that causes panic. Maybe it causes chaos. But maybe it also means more minds working on the problem, more resources, more chances to find a solution. I held up the recorder so she could see the red light. And now I have you on record confirming everything. Her eyes widened slightly, the first real surprise I'd seen from her. You're making a mistake, she said. No, you made the mistake, I replied. You thought fear would keep people in line, keep them quiet. But there are some things more important than fear. The door opened behind me. 2 security officers entered, hands on their weapons. Director? One of them asked. Hall kept her eyes on me. This man is trespassing. Escort him from the building. I pocketed the recorder. Too late, Hall. It's already transmitting to an external server. Deleting it won't help. Another bluff, but her eyes flickered with uncertainty. These spheres, I said as the guards approached me. They're going to keep growing, aren't they? Keep spreading? How long before they can't be contained? How long before one appears on Earth? That won't happen, she said, but there was something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Doubt. You don't know that, I said. You don't understand what these things are or where they come from. You're just reacting, hiding the truth instead of facing it. The guards took hold of my arms. The public deserves to know what's out there, I said as they began to pull me away. They deserve a chance to prepare. Prepare for what? Hall asked. The end? To fight, I answered. Together, not in the dark, not as sacrificial lambs sent out by people like you. I let the guards lead me toward the door. They weren't rough about it, just doing their job. This isn't over, Hall, I said over my shoulder. The truth's going to come out, one way or another. She remained at her desk, watching me go, that calculating look still in her eyes, weighing options, considering contingencies. I knew I'd just made myself the most hunted man in the system, but I also knew I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore, not with what I now understood. The guards led me to the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of Hall, already reaching for her comm unit. I had maybe hours before they came after me, before they realized my bluffs and decided I was too dangerous to leave alive. But I had the recording. I had the truth. And for the first time in 3 years, I had purpose. I didn't expect to sleep well that night after leaving Hall's office. Hard to rest easy when you've just made yourself the government's most wanted. But I'd been running on adrenaline for days, and my body finally gave out somewhere around 3 in the morning. The sharp knocking pulled me from a dead sleep. I rolled off the bed, instinctively reaching for the small pulse pistol I kept under my mattress. Proxima Colony wasn't exactly known for its crime rate, but old habits die hard when you've spent most of your life in deep space. The housing units here were basic, prefab structures with thin walls and minimal security. Mine sat at the edge of the settlement, backing up against the terraforming boundary where the air processors hadn't quite finished their work. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I checked the time. 5:17 in the morning. Nobody makes social calls at 5:17. Moving quietly to the door, I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No voices, no movement I could detect. I glanced at the security panel, but it was dark. Another power fluctuation. The colony grid wasn't what you'd call reliable. Who is it? I called, keeping my voice steady, pistol ready. Silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then, "It's cold out here, John." That voice. Older, rougher around the edges, but I knew it immediately. 3 years of serving together creates a memory that doesn't fade. I lowered the pistol and unlocked the door, pulling it open just enough to confirm what I already knew. Standing on my doorstep, illuminated by the dim colony streetlights, was Lieutenant Commander Clyde Becker. He looked different. His blonde hair had gone mostly gray, and new lines etched his face. He wore civilian clothes, dark jacket, practical pants, the kind of nondescript outfit that wouldn't draw attention. But his posture hadn't changed. still military straight even after all these years. "Becker," I said, opening the door wider. "How the hell did you find me?" He didn't smile, just gave a small nod. "Captain, may I come in?" I stepped back, gesturing him inside. The cool morning air followed him, making me suddenly aware I was standing there in just a t-shirt and sleep pants. I closed the door behind him, engaging the manual lock. "Not a captain anymore," I said, setting the pistol down on the small table by the door. "Haven't been for a long time." Becker glanced around my living space, all one room except for the bathroom. A bed against one wall, a small kitchen area, a desk with my terminal, and not much else. I'd never been one for possessions, and 3 years of colony life hadn't changed that. "Once a captain, always a captain," he said, his voice carrying that same crisp efficiency I remembered. "At least to those of us who served with you." I motioned to the room's only chair. "Sit. I'll make coffee." He took the seat while I moved to the kitchen area, grateful for something to do with my hands. My mind was racing, trying to calculate the risks of him being here. I hadn't seen Becker since that day at command when we were all separated for debriefing. 3 years without contact, and now he shows up at my door before dawn on a colony world 20 light years from Earth. "They told us you died," I said, measuring grounds into the filter. "Shuttle accident near Jupiter Station." Becker made a sound that might have been a laugh if there was any humor in it. "They told me the same about you. Heart failure. Said the stress of desk work after years in space was too much for your system." The coffee machine hummed to life. I leaned against the counter, studying him. "So we're both ghosts. Convenient for them, isn't it?" Becker crossed one leg over the other, his eyes never leaving mine. "Harder to look for dead men." The coffee finished brewing. I poured 2 mugs and handed one to Becker, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. I sat on the edge of my bed, facing him. "You didn't answer my question," I said. "How did you find me?" Becker took a sip of his coffee. "Jerome Munoz." I raised my eyebrows. "Munoz is alive too?" "Very much so, and still the best communications specialist I've ever known." Becker set his mug down on the floor beside the chair. "He intercepted your transit documentation when you left Earth, lost the trail for a while when you switched identities at the Martian hub, but he picked it up again when you registered for colony housing." I shook my head, impressed despite myself. "And Brianna? Beverly? Sandoval's with us." "Beverly." He paused, and I saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. "Beverly's death wasn't fabricated, John. She really did die in that hospital fire." The news hit me harder than I expected. I'd suspected as much. Beverly had been gathering information on Project Sphere right before her death, but hearing it confirmed made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Because of what she knew?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Becker nodded. "She was getting too close. Hall couldn't risk it." I took a long drink of my coffee, letting the bitter heat ground me. Outside, the colony was beginning to wake up. I could hear the faint hum of the early shift heading to the terraforming stations. "Why are you here, Clyde? After 3 years of nothing, you show up at my door. That's a hell of a risk." Becker leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because we need you, and because I saw your broadcast." That made me sit up straighter. "What broadcast?" "The recording you made in Hall's office." His eyes held mine. "Very clever, using an analog device. Took them almost a week to figure out how you did it." I set my mug down. "I released that through 6 different anonymous channels. There's no way to trace it back to me." "No, there isn't," Becker agreed. "But I know how you structure your reports, John. I served with you for 3 years. I recognized your handiwork immediately." I stood up and moved to the window, checking the street outside. Empty, except for a maintenance worker heading toward the atmospheric processors. "That recording was supposed to blow the lid off the whole thing," I said, not bothering to hide the bitterness in my voice. 17 artificial singularities growing steadily for almost 3 decades. Hall admitting they're intelligent, that they're colonizing us. And what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Becker sighed. Not nothing. The official channels dismissed it as a conspiracy theory, yes, called it clever audio manipulation. But people listened, John. The right people. I turned back to him. What people? Scientists, engineers, former military personnel who'd had their own encounters with the spheres. Becker stood up. Jerome and Brianna have been building a network for the past 2 years. People who believe, who've seen evidence themselves. Hope stirred in my chest, but I tamped it down. I'd learned the hard way not to trust hope. And what exactly is this network doing? Writing strongly worded letters to command? Becker actually smiled at that, a small upward turn of his mouth that looked rusty from disuse. We're doing a lot more than that. We have a ship. That caught me off guard. A ship? How the hell did you get a ship? It's amazing what resources become available when people with the right skills get motivated. He moved to stand beside me at the window. It's not exactly registered with command, former mining vessel, retrofitted. Small, but faster than it looks. And what are you doing with this unregistered ship? I asked, though I was beginning to see where this was heading. We're hunting spheres, Becker said simply, and we've found a way to detect them before they fully materialize. I stared at him. That's not possible. The energy signatures don't appear until the singularity stabilizes. Yes, Becker finished for me. That's what command believes. But Munoz discovered something in the data from Omega-7 that they missed. There's a gravitational precursor, almost undetectable unless you know exactly what to look for. My mind raced with the implications. If they could detect the spheres before they fully formed. And once you find them? I asked. We're working on that part. Becker's expression hardened. Sandoval has a theory about disrupting the formation process. We've had limited success in testing, but we need more data. More importantly, we need someone who's actually seen a sphere form and understands what we're dealing with. You've seen one too, I pointed out. I saw the aftermath, Becker corrected. You saw Kathleen interact with it. You saw what it did to her. His voice softened slightly. You're the only one who really saw it happen, John. I moved away from the window, pacing the small confines of my living space. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave, to let me continue my quiet exile on this backwater colony. I'd done my part. I'd gotten the truth out there, even if most people dismissed it. I'd risked everything. But another part of me, the part that still woke up sweating, seeing Kathleen's face distort as the sphere pulled her in, knew I couldn't refuse. Command will be watching for any unusual activity, I said, thinking out loud. If your ship starts poking around known singularity sites, we're not going anywhere near the known sites, Becker interrupted. We're looking for new formations before command even knows they exist. I stopped pacing. How many people do you have? 12, including Jerome and Brianna. Scientists, engineers, a couple of former command officers who got too close to the truth. Becker picked up his coffee mug and finished what was left. We're not an army, John, but we're all committed. We all understand what's at stake. Outside, the colony's day cycle was beginning in earnest. More people moved along the streets, heading to their shifts. Soon my neighbors would be up, and questions might be asked about my early morning visitor. When are you leaving? I asked. 2 hours. We have a shuttle at the edge of the settlement. Becker set his empty mug down. I won't lie to you. This is dangerous. Command has resources we can't match. If they catch us, they'll do worse than falsify our death certificates, I finished for him. He nodded grimly. I moved to my closet and pulled out the small duffel bag I'd arrived with 3 years ago. It wouldn't take long to pack. I had little more than clothes and a few personal items. The most valuable thing I owned was the encrypted drive containing all my research on the spheres, which I kept in a hidden compartment in my boot. You don't seem surprised that I'm saying yes, I said as I began gathering my belongings. Becker watched me from the center of the room. You released that recording knowing it would make you a target. You could have stayed quiet, kept your head down, lived out your life in peace, but you didn't." He paused. "People who take risks like that don't do it halfway." I stopped packing and looked at him. I did it because I couldn't live with myself otherwise. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kathleen. I saw what that thing did to her, and I knew there were more of them out there, that command was just watching them grow. "I know," Becker said quietly. "That's why I'm here." I nodded and returned to packing. It took less than 10 minutes to gather everything I needed. I changed into practical clothes: dark pants, long-sleeved shirt, sturdy boots with my encrypted drive safely hidden inside. I strapped the pulse pistol to my hip and covered it with a light jacket. "What about your job?" Becker asked as I shut down my terminal. "Won't they come looking when you don't show up?" I shrugged. "I'm a maintenance supervisor for the atmospheric processors. One of dozens. They'll assume I got caught in a pressure failure or decided colony life wasn't for me." I glanced around the small room one last time. Not much to leave behind. We left through the back door, avoiding the main street where more colonists were now going about their morning routines. Becker led me through a series of narrow alleys between the prefab housing units, clearly having mapped his approach carefully. "The shuttle's just beyond the perimeter fence," he said as we approached the edge of the settlement. About a half-mile walk through the transition zone. The transition zone was the buffer between the fully terraformed colony and the untamed Proxima landscape beyond. The air was thinner there and the ground less stable, but still breathable for short periods without supplemental oxygen. We passed through a maintenance gate in the perimeter fence, Becker using an override code that shouldn't have worked but did. The moment we stepped beyond the boundary, I felt the difference. The air had a metallic taste, and the reddish soil crunched differently underfoot. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked as we walked. "Coming to get you? About 3 months," Becker replied. "Building the network? Almost since the day they separated us for debriefing." He glanced at me. "I knew something was wrong when they told us you'd accepted a desk assignment. The John Mitchell I knew would never have gone quietly." I smiled despite myself. And yet here I was, living quietly on a colony world. "Strategic retreat isn't the same as surrender," Becker said. "You were gathering information, biding your time, just like the rest of us." We crested a small ridge, and I saw the shuttle in the distance, a small transport craft designed for planetary hops, its hull weathered and unmarked. As we approached, the entry hatch opened, and a figure emerged. Even at this distance, I recognized the precise movements, the watchful stance. Brianna Sandoval stood at the top of the ramp, hand resting casually near what I assumed was a concealed weapon. "She insisted on coming," Becker said she needed to see you with her own eyes. Sandoval had changed too. Her black hair was longer now, pulled back in a practical braid, and she'd added more muscle to her already athletic frame. But her eyes were the same, sharp, assessing, missing nothing. "Captain," she said as we reached the shuttle, her voice carrying that familiar mix of respect and independence. "Not a captain anymore, Brianna," I replied. She shook her head slightly. "With respect, sir, that's not how we see it." Inside the shuttle, Jerome Munoz sat at the communications console, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency over the controls. He looked up as we entered, and a rare smile crossed his face. "Captain Mitchell," he said, standing. "It's good to see you alive." "You too, Jerome." I set my bag down and looked around the shuttle's interior. It was small but well-maintained, with modifications I didn't recognize. "Quite an operation you've put together." "Necessity is the mother of invention," Munoz replied, gesturing to the equipment. "We've had to get creative with our resources." Sandoval secured the hatch behind us and moved to the pilot's seat. "We should get moving. The colony's atmospheric sensors will pick up our engine signature once we lift off." Becker nodded and took the co-pilot's chair. "Set course for the rendezvous point," The horizon should be waiting for us. The horizon? I asked, taking a seat behind Munoz. Our ship, Becker explained as Sandoval initiated the launch sequence. Named by Munoz, said something about facing the horizon when no one else would look at it. The engines hummed to life, and I felt the familiar sensation of thrust pushing me back against my seat. Through the viewport, I watched as Proxima Colony grew smaller, the collection of prefab structures shrinking until they were just a small cluster of lights on the planet's surface. As we broke atmosphere, I looked up at the stars, clear and sharp, without planetary distortion. Somewhere out there, the spheres were growing, consuming, waiting. Somewhere out there, Command was monitoring them, studying them, perhaps even attempting to communicate with them. And somewhere out there, Kathleen McCormick and Beverly Ortiz had died because of what they knew, what they'd seen. "We'll be at the rendezvous point in 20 minutes, Sandoval announced from the pilot's seat. No pursuit detected. "Good," Becker said, checking the sensor readings. "Keep us on this trajectory. We're still within colony traffic patterns." I leaned forward in my seat. "So tell me more about this detection method you've developed." Munoz turned in his chair to face me. "It started with the data we collected at Omega-7, he said, his voice carrying that precise, methodical tone I remembered. "I noticed something in the gravitational readings before the sphere fully materialized, a kind of ripple effect that Command either missed or ignored." "A ripple?" I asked. "More like a pulse," Munoz explained, his hands moving as he searched for the right words. "Extremely subtle. It appears approximately 72 hours before full manifestation." Sandoval adjusted our course slightly, keeping her focus on the controls. "We've confirmed the pattern with 3 potential formation sites so far." That caught my attention. 3? You've found 3 new spheres forming? 2 aborted before full manifestation, Becker said. The third, we weren't in time. The implication hung heavy in the shuttle cabin. Another Omega-7, another potential Kathleen. "How do you abort the formation?" I asked. Munoz and Becker exchanged a glance that told me this was where things got complicated. "It's not perfect," Becker admitted. "We're still working on the methodology." Sandoval snorted from the pilot's seat. "That's putting it mildly." "We've found that a precisely calibrated gravitational pulse can disrupt the formation process," Munoz continued, ignoring Sandoval's comment. "But the window is narrow, maybe 6 hours total, and we need to be within close proximity to the formation site." "And by close proximity, he means suicidally close," Sandoval added, not taking her eyes off the controls. I leaned back in my seat, processing this information. "So you're telling me you fly directly to where these things are forming, then what? Hit them with some kind of gravitational counterpulse?" "That's essentially it," Becker confirmed. "We've modified a standard mining pulse generator to create the opposite wave pattern of the sphere's formation signature." "It's dangerous as hell," Sandoval said bluntly. "Our first attempt nearly tore the ship apart. But it worked," Munoz added quickly. "The sphere collapsed before it could stabilize." I looked between them, trying to gauge what they weren't telling me. "And the second time?" Another exchange of glances. "We lost 2 people," Becker said quietly. "The pulse generator overloaded. They were in the engine room trying to stabilize it." I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the weight of those unknown lives. "I'm sorry. We all knew the risks," Sandoval said, her voice softer than before. They knew what they were fighting for. The shuttle fell silent as we continued our ascent. Through the viewport, I watched as Proxima B receded, its reddish surface giving way to the vast blackness of space. In the distance, I could make out a small, irregular shape, presumably their ship, the Horizon. "There she is," Becker said, following my gaze. "Not much to look at, but she's fast and her sensors are top of the line." The Horizon grew larger as we approached. Becker hadn't been exaggerating. It wasn't an impressive vessel visually. The hull bore the scars of its mining days, with obvious retrofits and modifications breaking up its original design. But I could see the care that had gone into those modifications. Sensor arrays more sophisticated than a mining vessel would need, reinforced shielding around what I assumed was the engine core. "We've been detected," Munoz announced, checking his console. "They're opening the docking bay." Sandoval adjusted our approach vector, lining up with the ship's small docking bay. The shuttle shuddered slightly as we passed through the magnetic containment field, then settled onto the deck with a soft thud. "Welcome to the horizon," Becker said, standing. "It's not command issue, but it's home." As the shuttle powered down, I gathered my bag and followed them to the hatch. Sandoval went first, followed by Munoz. Becker paused, turning to me. "John," he said, his voice low enough that the others couldn't hear, "there's something else you should know." The seriousness in his tone made me stop. "What is it?" "The rest of the crew, they've all lost someone to the spheres, or to command's cover-up." His eyes held mine. "They're good people, but they're also desperate. They've put everything into this mission." I nodded slowly. "I understand." "Do you?" Becker searched my face. "Because I need to know you're all in. These people are risking their lives based on what we've told them. They need to believe their captain is committed to the same cause." "Their captain," I repeated. "Yes," Becker said firmly. "Their captain. My captain." Before I could respond, the shuttle hatch opened fully. Standing on the deck outside were 9 people of varying ages and backgrounds, all watching me with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hope. An older woman with steel gray hair stepped forward. "Captain Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "Dr. Elena Volkov. I was chief physicist at Europa Station until I asked too many questions about gravitational anomalies in the outer belt." I shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Dr. Volkov." A younger man stood beside her, his dark skin contrasting with the white scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "Marcus Reed, engineering specialist. My brother was on the Artemis when it disappeared." One by one, they introduced themselves. Scientists, engineers, former command personnel. Each had a story. Each had lost something or someone. Their faces blurred together as I shook hands, nodded, tried to memorize names. The last was a woman about my age, with short-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Sarah Chen," she said simply. "Tactical officer, CSV Hawking. We investigated a gravitational anomaly near Titan 2 years ago. I was the only survivor." When the introductions were complete, they all stood looking at me, waiting. I realized with a jolt that Becker was right. They saw me as their captain, their leader in this impossible mission. The recording I'd released had given them hope, validation of what they'd experienced or suspected. "I'm not," I began, then stopped, unsure what to say. Becker stepped up beside me. "Captain Mitchell has agreed to join our mission," he announced. "His first-hand experience with the Omega-7 incident will be invaluable as we refine our detection and disruption techniques." Murmurs of approval rippled through the small group. Dr. Volkov nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "We should get underway," Reed said, checking his wrist display. "Colony traffic control will be expanding their scan range in about 20 minutes. The group dispersed, moving with the practiced efficiency of a crew that had worked together before. Munoz and Sandoval headed toward what I assumed was the bridge, while others returned to their stations throughout the ship. "I'll show you to your quarters," Becker said. "Then we can brief you properly on our current mission." I followed him through the narrow corridors of the horizon. The interior was as patched together as the exterior, but everything was clean and functional. The ship hummed with energy as systems powered up for departure. "Current mission?" I asked as we walked. Becker nodded. "We detected a formation signature yesterday in the Kuiper belt beyond Neptune's orbit. If our calculations are correct, we have about 60 hours before it stabilizes." My stomach tightened at the thought. Another sphere, another Omega-7 in the making. And Command doesn't know about it? Not yet, Becker said. The signature is faint enough that their monitoring stations won't pick it up for another day or two. By then, we'll already be there. He stopped at a small door and pressed the access panel. It slid open to reveal compact quarters, a bunk, a small desk with a terminal, and minimal storage space. It's not much, Becker said apologetically. It's more than I had on my first deep space assignment, I replied, setting my bag on the bunk. It'll do fine. Becker leaned against the doorframe, watching as I unpacked my few belongings. You still haven't said if you're in, John. Really in? I paused, holding the encrypted drive that contained all my research on the spheres. These people, they're putting a lot of faith in someone they've just met. They're putting faith in what you represent, Becker corrected, in what you did when you released that recording. Most of them had already lost someone by then, but they didn't have proof, didn't have confirmation that they weren't alone. He straightened. You gave them that. I set the drive on the desk and turned to face him fully. And if I can't be what they need me to be, if I can't lead them, then just be who you've always been, Becker said simply. The man who wouldn't stay silent when it mattered. The ship's engines rumbled to life beneath our feet, the vibration familiar and somehow comforting after 3 years planetside. An announcement came over the comms. All stations, prepare for departure. Gravitational dampeners at 80%. Becker pushed off from the doorframe. Bridge in 20 minutes. We'll go over the mission parameters, bring you up to speed on everything we know. I nodded, and he turned to leave. Clyde, I called after him. He paused, looking back. I'm in, all the way in. Something in his expression eased, a tension I hadn't fully registered until it was gone. He gave a short nod, then continued down the corridor. Alone in my quarters, I sat on the edge of the bunk and looked at the small space that would now be my home. 3 years in a colony prefab, and before that, the sterile quarters at Command. None of them had ever felt like they belonged to me, not really. I reached into my boot and pulled out the small holopic I kept there, alongside the encrypted drive. It was the only image I had of my old crew. Becker, Munoz, Sandoval, Beverly, and Kathleen. Taken during a rare moment of downtime, all of us in civilian clothes, relaxed and smiling. Kathleen stood in the center, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, green eyes bright with laughter at something Munoz had just said. She'd been brilliant, curious, always the first to volunteer for the challenging assignments. The kind of engineer who saw problems as puzzles waiting to be solved. I ran my thumb over her image, remembering her face as the sphere took her, the moment of terrible understanding in her eyes before they stretched and distorted. We're coming for them, Kathleen, I said quietly to the empty room. We're going to stop them. The ship's engines increased in pitch as we broke free of Proxima B's gravity well. Through the small viewport in my quarters, I watched as the stars shifted, indicating our change in course. Somewhere ahead lay the Kuiper Belt and a forming sphere, a threat most of humanity didn't even know existed. For the first time in years, I felt the familiar surge of purpose that came with Command, with having a clear mission and a crew depending on me. The truth about Omega-7 might never be officially acknowledged, but out here, with these people who had seen and lost and believed, I could still fight. I could still make Kathleen's death mean something.